This is Crime Dog. Roll the intro. A young woman with striking blue eyes shines bright from every news kiosk across America on the cover of Fortune magazine. Elizabeth Holmes is the founder of Theranos, a health company that soared in valuation after claiming to have revolutionized blood testing by developing methods to identify a number of health anomalies from a single drop of blood from someone's finger. According to Holmes, just 50 microliters of blood would be enough to carry out over 70 analyses, 100 times less than a classic venipuncture. In a country like the US, where a blood test can cost an arm and a leg, Theranos could be an absolute game changer while saving thousands of lives. With a company valued at $9 billion, Forbes magazine had named Holmes the wealthiest self-made billionaire in America. She wins several awards and makes it into Times magazine's list of the 100 most influential people in the world. And she's made a global entrepreneurial ambassador by then President Barack Obama. In the space of a few months, she becomes one of the most highly regarded business figures in the world. And the media can't resist helping endless praise on America's next Steve Jobs. Holmes doesn't shy away from the spotlight, taking advantage of her newfound fame to promote Theranos further.
You founded this company 12 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Tell them how old you were.
I was 19. Yeah.
So, don't worry about the future. We're in good hands.
As Bill Clinton pronounces these words, a journalist is investigating Elizabeth Holmes. Something is not quite right here. Theranos has released no real data on its innovative technology, and people are starting to ask questions. What if this technology didn't really exist? What if this self-made billionaire, the golden child of Silicon Valley, was a liar? French-American investigative journalist John Carreyrou is sat at his desk at the Wall Street Journal headquarters, having recently finished a lengthy investigation into Medicare and the numerous frauds surrounding the system. He's on the lookout for a new story when he gets a call. It's a guy called Adam Clapper, a pathologist who helped him out with some of the more technical details surrounding his last case. Clapper tells him that he may have a tip-off for him. He'd asked him if he'd read an article which appeared in the New Yorker in December 2014 about the startup Theranos and its founder, Elizabeth Holmes. John, being subscribed to the New Yorker, replies yes. He recalls that the company had provided very little data in peer-reviewed journals with regards to how their devices worked or attesting to the quality of the results, a necessary step for any serious medical program. He also recalls an ironic statement from the article in which Holmes's description of the process was comically vague. Quote, "A chemistry is performed so that a chemical reaction occurs and generates a signal from the chemical interaction with the sample, which is translated into a result, which is then reviewed by certified laboratory personnel." Which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Adding that thanks to miniaturization and automation, they were able to handle these tiny samples. Carreyrou shares Clapper's skepticism. He discovers that the study quoted by Holmes to refute the criticism of a scientist on the reliability of any results from a single drop of blood came from an obscure medical review called Hematology Reports, which only contained data from a single analysis of 6 patients. Far too small a study to make any claims. But it gets worse. The journalist is contacted by a physician called Richard Fuiz, who tells him that Holmes is lying to authorities and that her technology is inept, and that by going to market, real lives could be put in danger. He takes this information very seriously and he decides to dig deeper. 2 weeks later, he leaves from JFK and he flies to San Francisco. Silicon Valley is the epicenter of big tech. Each year, programmers, engineers, and salespeople head there from all over the world to join the over 6,000 companies based there, or maybe set up their own business. With the explosion of media interest in her, Holmes had joined the likes of Steve Jobs and Elon Musk at the top of a tree dominated by men. Born in 1984, she completed an exemplary school education before being accepted into Stanford University in 2002 where she studied chemical engineering. However, after just 1 year of studies and a work placement in Singapore, she told one of her professors that she wanted to put her studies on hold and set up her own business. During the summer, she filed a patent to try and bring her invention to life. Using a combination of micro and nanotechnology, her prototype claimed to be able to quickly analyze blood and provide a suitable medical treatment. The professor declared in an interview with Fortune magazine that her idea wasn't that far-fetched, and that it could be looking at the next Bill Gates. With a history of medical professionals in her family, she believes it's in her genes. She was always first into the office and lives 24/7 for her company. At 9 years old, she wrote a letter to her father.
I was 9 years old when I wrote this, and it begins, "Dear Daddy, what I want out of life is to discover something new, something that mankind didn't know was possible. I also want to study about man and his ways. Life is really interesting."
She also had a certain amount of personal trauma in her life which put her on this path.
I grew up spending summers and the holidays with my uncle. I remember his love of crossword puzzles and trying to teach us to play football. I remember how much he loved the beach. I remember how much I loved him. He was diagnosed one day with skin cancer, which all of a sudden was brain cancer.
She would often repeat the same phrase about living in a better world, a world in which no one has to say goodbye too early.
In which no one ever has to say goodbye too soon. We have an opportunity to do good in the world, and we have an opportunity by building a business as a vehicle for making a change in the world to help to shape our healthcare system and to shape it in such a way in which we empower individuals to get access to information that fundamentally means you don't have to say goodbye too soon.
What do you dream for something in 2025?
That less people have to say goodbye too soon to people they love.
Over the next 5 months, Carreru made several return trips to San Francisco to meet some Theranos sources under the threat of legal proceedings, some being tracked by private detectives. He discovered a company dominated by a toxic mixture of duplicity, paranoia, aggressive management, and general incompetence. He uncovered information that Theranos had been embroiled in a web of lies since 2006. 2 years after being founded, the company abandoned its initial product idea, the TheraPatch, a pure product of science fiction. Worn on the wrist, it was designed to diagnose anything that was wrong with you through microneedles, and then deliver the appropriate drugs into the blood through the patch. They quickly burned through their first 6 million of raised capital, and in 2007, an engineer managed to build a prototype for a product called the Edison, a machine capable of carrying out complete blood work from the prick of a fingertip, all carried out in a mini lab. The problem for Holmes was that it didn't work, but she needed money, so she decided to present to investors a machine which displayed pre-recorded results. And they fell for it. She received an additional $9 million. As the millions poured in, partnerships were set up, but the results were far from reliable. The types of blood tests she was claiming required a variety of techniques, and the main stumbling block lied in the miniaturization of the technology, especially since Holmes wouldn't budge on the quantity of blood needed. To conceal their negligence, Holmes and her second-in-command, Ramesh Balwani, established a system where no department would communicate with another one without the authorization of a manager. The employees' emails were screened, and the building was put under 24-hour surveillance. Anyone who disagreed would be fired by Balwani before being forced to sign multiple confidentiality agreements. They justified their obsession with secrecy, claiming that they didn't want competitors or larger labs to try and steal their technology. This resulted in a massive staff turnover and a lack of qualified personnel. As the Edison machine didn't actually function, they managed to find a workaround. The blood analyses were carried out on a doctored Siemens machine instead, which gave the impression to the outside world that their Edison machine was doing all the work. The technology that she was promoting using a tiny amount of blood simply didn't exist. Having concluded his investigation, John Carreru, his chief editor, and the Wall Street Journal lawyers await a Theranos delegation at the paper's headquarters. They go into the meeting looking for answers, but they are just met by a wall of Theranos lawyers who are not in the mood to cooperate. Leading the charge is Theranos lawyer David Boies, who goes on the offensive.
We wouldn't be here, spend all this time and effort, if We've got a technology.
So why don't we discuss it more freely?
Yeah, because it's trade secret, that's why. And because you won't sign an NDA.
Is there really new technology?
Well, but listen, is it really new technology? This is something no one's ever been able to do before, okay? Theranos is doing it. And unless it's magic, it's a new technology.
You're saying that the trade secrets also covers the way in which you run a blood sample on the Siemens Advia?
I don't know the answer to that, but I can tell you that it could or it could not.
It just feels like you want us to give you the formula for Coke in order to convince you that it doesn't contain arsenic.
Nobody's asked for the formula for Coke. We're looking for a generic explanation.
You don't need to know how they do it.
The conversation goes nowhere. The lawyers refuse to answer the questions based on the confidential nature of the business, and they leave, threatening the paper with legal action. Carreiro just carries on with his investigation, and the lawyers tell Holmes what he knows. So she goes straight to the top. She pays a visit to Rupert Murdoch, owner of the Wall Street Journal and Theranos investor, to the tune of $125 million. She flat out demands that he shuts down the publication of Carreiro's article, which according to her was packed full of false allegations. Murdoch, however, refuses to go along with her, stating he has full confidence in his journalists. A few floors down, Carreiro is completely unaware that Holmes is trying to smother his story. His article is finally published on October the 15th, 2015. In it, he reveals the huge limitations of Theranos' technology, the use of conventional machines to cover up for Edison's inadequacies, and the multiple dilutions of miniature samples distorting the results sent out to clients. He names some of his sources, a Theranos director who resigned when he found out what was going on, and also a patient and her doctor who received false results. He concludes that Theranos went onto the market far too quickly and put in danger the lives of thousands of Arizona residents. In the fallout from the article, Holmes attempts to reassure investors, but her ambiguous answers to questions do little to further her reputation, and the scandal continues to grow. In a bold move, she goes to a Wall Street Journal conference and denies all the allegations put forward by the journalist.
You've said that the journal's reporting on Theranos has been erroneous and, quote, grounded in baseless assertions. If I went to one of the centers and I got a pinprick, and I only gave that much blood, right? What tests are you currently able to perform for that blood using anything other than commercially available lab equipment?
So we have never used commercially available lab equipment for fingerstick-based tests.
The regulatory authorities who've been alerted by the article carry out an audit of the Theranos labs. Numerous infractions are revealed, and several medical institutions and pharmaceutical companies cut their ties with Theranos. The company and its owner are now under serious threat of being banned from taking any blood tests from anyone. Following the investigation, the American Federal Authority, which controls labs, subsequently bans Holmes from the sector of biomedical analysis for 2 years. As a result, multiple financial and media outlets expressed their doubts over the company, remember, once valued at $9 billion. The house of cards is slowly collapsing. It becomes clear that the Edison machine and the Minilab are incapable of producing their own results on a single sample, so they are forced to cancel the results of hundreds of thousands blood samples. You have to give her credit for perseverance, because in 2016 she once again promotes her Minilab to industry specialists. But it's all based on falsehoods again, as the data comes from vein samples.
And in terms of what we saw today, I mean, I guess what I'm surprised about is, you look at the people in the room, and there's clearly been a lot of interest in your company. I would argue that a lot of that comes from the fact that there were these claims that were made that were very broad early on. 70 tests, the whole panoply of lab tests from a couple drops of blood. And the evidence that you presented fell far short of that. So how should we think about that?
This most recent public fiasco leads to many investors asking for answers. Some of them start legal proceedings against Theranos, while most of them jump ship and sell their shares for a loss. David Boies, whose law firm represented Holmes, cuts all ties with Theranos following disagreements over the handling of the crisis. And Walgreens, their pharmaceutical partner, cuts ties too. In an open letter in October 2016, she states that the company will be closing its labs and the remaining 340 employees would be let go. And in June 2015, Holmes and Balwani are charged with major fraud. The company is dissolved in September of the same year, having spent over $1 billion. Since being charged, she's given no interviews. Until the last drop of blood, It seems like she believed in her company and her vision to change the world. Unfortunately, she was delusional. She admits to the regulatory body controlling financial markets that she lied during interviews, but falls short of taking responsibility for the shortcomings of her business. On the 3rd of January 2022, a court concluded that she deliberately misled investors. She is convicted of 4 counts of wire fraud with a maximum sentence of 20 years. What happens to Holmes will be seen as a test case. Does corporate fraud in Silicon Valley end up with a slap on the wrist or serious jail time? Well, we found out on November the 18th, 2022, when she was sentenced to 11 years in prison for defrauding investors. A pregnant Elizabeth Holmes, now 38, tearfully told the court that she felt deep pain for those misled by the scam. She's expected to appeal against the sentence, which was handed down by a California court. The outcome is a stark warning to Silicon Valley, a place which promotes a culture of get to market fast, even if the product isn't ready, fulfilling objectives to the detriment of customers. You can maybe get away with this when you're selling a phone or a computer, but this is a medical product with serious outcomes on people's health and well-being. Fake it till you make it doesn't really hold up in this situation. Like many before her, she anticipated her success by giving all the appearances of a successful businesswoman, but came up against technological challenges that made the reality impossible. In his book on Holmes's downfall, Carrero doesn't hold back. He calls her a manipulator and suggests she has all the characteristics of a sociopath. The media also has a certain responsibility in all of this. A young woman making it in a technological world ruled by men made a great story, and that may have blinded them from the truth. Let me know in the comments below if you think Elizabeth Holmes deserved what she got. Subscribe and give us a thumbs up to show your support. Until next time, my fellow crime dogs, stay safe and look after yourselves.